Welcome to Talking Points. My name is Dr. Stephen E. Gardner, and I'm here with you today to do our final segment on the paradigm has shifted. We've covered a lot of material, a lot of thought-provoking ideas during this time. And today I want to wrap things up. Today I want to bring some truths out that I think is really going to help us to make sense of what a paradigm is really all about, and help us to make sense that the times that we're living in right now are paradigmic times, or times that a paradigm has shifted, a time to where we learn to do and be different, a time that we learn to do and be better. So let's get right into this as we wrap this up today. The paradigm has really shifted. Now, what are you going to do about it? The paradigm has really shifted. Now, what are you going to do about it? In review, we've come to learn these things. In this series, we learned that every aspect of life operates or is influenced by a paradigm. Simply put, a paradigm is a way of doing things. Therefore, a paradigm shift is simply a move in doing things a certain way. And usually there are reasons that precede a change in the norm. There's a reason why things have changed from doing things the normal way or the way we have been used to. I'm pretty sure you've heard terms like this. Well, this is the way we've always done it, or this is what has always been expected. Yet sometimes things happen in life to where the way we've always done things, the way we've always expected, is challenged or is threatened by a different way that might be better, or by a different way that might be, most certainly is different than the way we've done things in the past. And that's what a paradigm shift is really all about. We've learned that the globe is undergoing a paradigm shift since the emergence of COVID-19. Every sector of life has made to make major and minor adjustments to what? Remain viable because of this shift. However, certain sectors, such as online educations and business that were operating virtually prior to COVID-19, weren't phased like sectors that had to establish infrastructure to remain viable. And this is true. There were a lot of people that may have had online businesses before this pandemic happened. And there were a lot of universities that had already moved toward or had a sector that of their university that was virtual. They weren't affected as much. But those individuals and those businesses, and even as it comes around to the religious atmosphere, those churches that have been accustomed to the norm of having face-to-face contact with its members and its constituents, have had to make major adjustments just to remain viable, just to remain, to grow along with this curve, as it were. We also discussed that the impact of these changes they've had some major change on religiosity. And I just kind of alluded toward that because church has been affected, and not just church, but mosque, synagogue and other houses of worship that have relied upon face-to-face contact. Religiosity has been impacted, but I'm going to say something that we need to think differently about. Spirituality is different than religiosity and should never be affected by external circumstances. Spirituality is different than religiosity and should never be affected by external circumstances. Some people are finding out that the way that they have been more religious and not as spiritual as they would like to believe. Let me say that one more time. Some people are finding out that they have been more religious and not as spiritual as they would like to believe. This pandemic put traditional religiosity and real spirituality to the test. Here's a quote from Jesus of Nazareth. It's found in Luke chapter 5, verses 37 through 39. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the new wine will burst the skins and will be spilled, and the skins will be destroyed. But new wine must be put into fresh wineskins, and no one after drinking old wine desires new, but says the old is good. Well, let's do a spiritual reflection upon the paradigm has really shifted. In this passage of scripture, Jesus implies that the old ways cannot be mixed with the new ways. Now, this is true. And so if we're going to be contextual about it, Jesus was implying that the gospel cannot be contained within Judaism without destroying them both. The new ways in which God is dealing with humanity through Jesus cannot be mixed with the old ways. The gospel is a new way. And it is the picture of the gospel as new that the presupposition for Jesus's being portrayed later in Luke and in Acts as what? The prophet like unto Moses. So in context here, Jesus is referring to what he was offering could not be contained within Judaism. It would have to have a transition. And let me say this, the transition from the current form of Judaism to what Jesus was offering should have been seamless had those individuals who were in Israel at the time, the Pharisees and Sadducees, if they had fully acknowledged that Jesus was Messiah, it would have been a seamless transition to follow the way that the Christ was offering. However, we find out later in Luke and Acts that it's purported that Jesus was a prophet like Moses. And a new prophet, as it were, will bring a fresh message. And so this is kind of a spiritual way of looking at this, using the scriptures as a way, using what Jesus, who came through Israel's religion at the time and was offering them something different. And what he was offering would have put that particular reality of worship, that particular reality of religiosity, that into a what? Different form. It was going to occur, it was going to cause rather, a paradigm shift. We talked the last time how that when Jesus encountered the woman at the well, that he said a time was coming that basically you won't be dependent upon Jerusalem or this mountain as a place to worship. But however, the paradigm shift, if I would paraphrase, would occur because why? People who are born of the Spirit and people who realize that God is a spirit, they also realize that God is looking for people that are not dependent upon physical structure as where to worship, but rather to worship God in spirit and also in truth. And so what has happened a lot of times in traditional religion, that the place where we meet has become sacred. And I'm not saying that it hasn't. However, we place more sacredness on the place that we worship rather than the sacredness placed upon the person who's worshiping. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. Let's go on a little bit further here. So we can find out this. The conclusion of the second picture is stated positively. New wine must have new wineskins. New ways must have new containers. Jesus' teaching will not survive by making it conform to old ways. A new form, a new spirit, a new approach is required. Now, as we think about this spiritual reflection about a shifting or a shifted paradigm, we understand why new wine cannot be contained in old wineskins. Because why? Those old wineskins have expanded to its fullest capacity. And in order for it to, if you put new wine in one that's already been expanded as far as it can go, what's going to happen? That wineskin is going to burst. So what they would have to do in order to make that a new wineskin, some adjustments would have to be made to that old wineskin to make it new again, to make it a brand new container. They wouldn't go out and buy a new container, but it would go through a process of making this old container new so that it could contain the new wine. Jesus' teaching will not survive by making it conform to old ways. What has to happen? A new form, a new spirit, and a new approach are required. Now, if this happened in the transition from Judaism, as it were, to classic Christianity as it eventually came to be known, if that was a paradigm shift, then paradigm shifts are what? Paradigm shifts are commonplace among people and have occurred at many times throughout society. In fact, in the early church and throughout the New Age, to re-Judaize Christianity would have missed the newness of what Jesus brings. The issue raised here is one of the major concerns of the book of Acts, as the church wrestles with the proper limits of the influence of its Jewish heritage. The focus is not on the return to something old and ancient, but on the presence of something new. The focus here was not on the return of something old and ancient, but on the presence of something new. At that particular time when the church was born, Israel realized we've got something new that's going on here. These people, the people of the way, they are really following him. They have talked about his resurrection and how they've talked about he's come back to life and he's been seen by others. This is not going away. This is not changing. So what Jesus introduced into the world of religiosity, especially from a Judeo-Christian standpoint, was a new paradigm. It was a paradigm shift that the way things are going to go from this time forward would be paradigmic. It would be a paradigm shift. It's not going away. It's not going back to the way it was, but rather, how are we going to deal with this, with the presence here of something that's new? And that's something to think about. If it happens in religiosity and in churchdom, so is it happening in other aspects of society. And we need to be open to change and cooperate with change and manage ourselves in the midst of the change, because that's where the real issue is that we're managing ourselves so much as things are changing. Well, let's look at a social application in regards to the paradigm has really shifted. Putting new wine in new wineskins suggests that we have to be open to change. And sometimes that change means that we'll have to do things differently. Sometimes that change suggests that the old approach is outdated or the situation presented requires a more relevant and viable strategy, a paradigm shift. All of society as we know it, locally and globally, have had to consider a new way of doing things as a result of the pandemic. When we are accustomed to doing things a particular way and it works for us, an immediate shift will result in resistance. Let me say this. When we are accustomed to doing things a particular way and it works for us, an immediate shift from that, guess what we're going to get? Guess what you're going to get? You're going to get some form of resistance. And that's what we see there in this particular parable that Jesus said. He says, no man having drunk old wine immediately desires new, for he says the old is better. In fact, in the King James, it says, no one having drunk old wine straightway desires new, for he says the old is better. And that is what we're hearing from people that want things to go to the way it used to be. What they're saying, in essence, is that the old is better. I like the way things used to be. I like the way things were. I was reading an article in Forbes, and I have to find it. And in Forbes, they kind of contrasted the pandemic of today and the pandemic that happened around early 1900s. I think it was the some sort of flu, as it were. And the pictures that they had were very similar to the pictures we got now. They had on masks, like we got on masks. There were other things that kind of paralleled this particular response to a pandemic. Now, our particular problem and challenge has been in this society is that we too often are too quick to politicize something and blame the left or blame the right for something that's very clear, that's above the pay grade of the left and the right. A pandemic is above the pay grade of the left and the right. It is something that happens in society that occurs from time to time, and humanity adjusts to it. If I lived along the Gulf, there are things that I'm going to be accustomed to being prepared for. And you can't put politics on a hurricane, or you can't put politics on a tsunami. If you live in that region, bottom line is you're going to have hurricanes. In fact, hurricane seasons start at a certain time, and especially around the Gulf of Mexico or the Caribbean, there are going to be hurricanes that are going to flow through that region historically every year about that same time frame. It's expected. And so a lot of times what we're dealing with here is that because this particular pandemic and outbreak is forcing a pandemic or paradigm shift upon the entire globe. And there are factions that are saying, they're saying this or that. We shouldn't do this or that. Yet it's very clear that things will happen climatically that has happened historically. And we should be open to respond to these things the best that we can and with the best that science and prayer can produce. So, what people are saying through their resistance is that the old is better. The resistance to change and adapting to safe measures for the benefit of all society has also resulted in conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories to support not changing or minimizing the seriousness of the need to change, of the need to prepare oneself. Like we saw last year, we saw that some minimize the seriousness of COVID-19 and say, well, we'll be back to normal in 3 months. And here we are a year later and things are not back to normal. And now people are getting vaccinated to create herd immunity. Conspiracy theories are a clever device of the fearful. Let me say that again. Conspiracy theories are a clever device of the fearful. They suggest a possibility of two intentions. First, they suggest if we change, some sort of damnation awaits us. Second, we shouldn't change. We should remain the same. And anyone who encourages us to change from the accepted norm is demonized. Both of these possibilities are rooted in fear. And we saw a lot of this going on last year. We saw a lot of this happening in the election cycle year of 2020. I'm sure that there are other possibilities, but these are two that come to mind. The truth is, many people who are hardliners and resisting change for various reasons have become reasonable and adapted to new measures. In fact, some of the people that had come to understand when COVID-19 hit their own household, they become to realize that this is really a public health issue, and their mindset was changed because it might have happened to them. It might have happened to their family. People that have been suspect of taking a shot, as it were, taking a vaccination, have good reasons why to be suspect of it. Some people are using the wait and see. Some people are hardliners and said that they won't. Yet I've seen people that have shifted from these hardline attitudes to one that's more reasonable to adapt these new measures. In fact, I was not so open to the idea of getting a shot, as it were, but I eventually came around to see that this was something that's not just about me, but it's about all of us, and that it's a good thing. We obey the science in the simplest things in life because prior to this, the science has revealed that things happen when we don't obey certain biological functions. For example, we obey the science every morning when we get up and we brush our teeth, as it were. Picking up a toothbrush and toothpaste has to do with science. Someone proven that oral hygiene, protects your gums, protects your teeth, and most certainly protects people from turning their nose up at you if you don't engage in some sort of oral hygienic exercise. We obey the science in the simplest things. It's when people run awry with conspiracy theories that make these normal things that we do to become blown or to be minimized because there is a tendency to not want to change. Now, nobody wants to change when things have been so comfortable to be the way they are. However, it's a time and a season that we need to be open to all the possibilities that have to do with this kind of change. I'm going to say this again. I'm sure that there are other possibilities, but the two that I've mentioned have come to mind. The truth is, many people who are hardliners and resisting change for various reasons have become reasonable and adapted to new measures. Straightway, they didn't desire the new, but now they have come around. The word straightway means immediately. This lends to the idea that people have warmed up to something new, something different, something fresh. Paradigm shifts have to be warmed up to by all interested parties. It is certainly not easy to shift from something that you are used to. It is not easy to shift from something that you are comfortable with to something that's unfamiliar. That's not comfortable. So we have to manage our discomfort when it comes to navigating through a paradigm shift. Generally speaking, people are not ready for change because why? It's uncomfortable. I just said that. It's unpredictable. It's ambiguous. All change requires some risk, and there's absolutely no way to live in this life risk-free. We can't live in this life risk-free. Even a life of faith has some risk. And I'm going to ask you the question: how many inventions or ideas received the open arms of society, which at first was balked at, and they didn't think it would work? There were a lot of inventions or ideas out there that were balked at because they did not think that it would ever work. Yet there are many ideas out there and inventions that have been adopted and have been embraced. What about the Wright brothers when they, made this airplane? Look at the laughingstock that they were. Yet the truth is, now based upon their bumbling and their science, as it were, we have airplanes that are able to obey the law of lift and to land and to take off. And so all of these things happen because what? A paradigm shift occurred. Or we can borrow from a biblical story that basically in the days of Noah, it has been stated that a mist came up and covered the earth, that there was no rain that came down. So this mist covered the earth, and that's how vegetation and so on and so forth was taken care of. However, when Moses gave his word, the word that he received from God to build an ark, people balked at it. It was, something's wrong with you, man. You're building a boat in your backyard, man, and ain't no water. Come on, something wrong with you. Your elevator is not going to the top floor. However, the time came when the flood came, everything that everything that Noah had stated, now the reality that there's something we've got to do about it. People got on the boat and where they were protected. And those who did not shift with this new move, they were washed up. They were not able to move forward into the next dimension of life. And so sometimes paradigm shifts can have drastic effect on society. Generally speaking, and let's just keep it real. Generally speaking, people are not ready for change because change is uncomfortable, unpredictable, and ambiguous. Uncomfortable, unpredictable, and ambiguous. Well, I want to sum up on the paradigm has really shifted with a few thoughts that I think that we can take away. And so if you have a pen and piece of paper, write down some of these thoughts and reflect upon them. Maybe you can come up with some of your own. Paradigm shifts begin in your own mind. We make the decision if we want to change or not. So if I don't want to change, I don't have to. But so where does a shift begin? It begins in your own mind. Paradigm shifts take time and are a process to be worked through. So it's, they're not always easy. Everything is not always hunky-dory. I think those of us who live in this era and have only seen life a certain way and our comforts of life or our American society have only seen it a certain way, and now something threatens the way things used to be, people are not ready to give up that very easily. Paradigm shifts take time and are a process that has to be worked through. Paradigm shift begins with honoring the past and its accomplishments, dreams, and visions, along with a personal commitment to build on them and move into the future. So you're not negating what happened in the past. You're honoring it, but at the same time, you're building upon it. Paradigm shifts build upon past accomplishments to create a better and a different future. Paradigm shifts validate that death and life coexist. And we can see that in John chapter 12, where Jesus said, except the corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abides alone. But if it die, it produces much fruit. And we don't even think about this in life. That we see trees that produce, that produce fruit, and then the fruit falls to the ground, and those seeds bring up another fruit. So you see that death and life coexist. So paradigm shifts, confirm that death and life does coexist. And there's probably more philosophically and even spiritually that can be expanded upon that statement alone. Paradigm shifts reveal people's fear and the challenge it presents to the people of faith who are trying to make sense of it. Paradigm shifts reveal people's fear and the challenge it presents to people of faith who are what? They're trying to make sense of it. Last year, this time, boy, we as pastors, we was trying to make sense of all that's going on. We were told to shelter in place. We were told that we couldn't go out. We couldn't do things. We had to be masked up. And rampant fear was running. And yet at the same time, we had to care for the sheep. How do we continue to care for sheep when we're told we can't meet? And so we began to learn ways. We began to find innovative ways. So Zoom came into play, StreamYard and other types of ingenuities began to come into play because now they proved to be a viable option that allows us to care for the flock, allows for the flock to receive the word, and so on and so forth. Paradigm shift revealed people's fear and the challenge it presents to the people of faith who are trying to make sense of it. Paradigm shifts have been the breeding ground for opportunity. There are a lot of people that have profited because of the shift that is currently going on globally. People have saw ways that they can make a profit, that the ways they can, do business. It opens up areas of opportunity that we never thought about. In fact, there are certain businesses that have had to go to a virtual environment, have come to realize, we can continue to still, be competitive and not have to deal with the overhead that this building costs us. So these are some of the things that are going through the business world's mind. Paradigm shifts have been the breeding ground for opportunity. And lastly, paradigm shifts have increased individual and corporate capacity. When we undergo a paradigm shift in our individual life and we make adjustments, it's an opportunity for us to increase our capacity. Let me say this to people of faith. Now, your church has an hybrid opportunity to present. You can either present an online version of worship, and you can also present a face-to-face version. An hybrid approach we see happening in business, where a lot of businesses now realize, hey, we don't want to do away with this virtual context, but this virtual opportunity has opened doors that otherwise we would not have this a situation to benefit us. So not only individual, but also corporate capacity increases as a result of paradigm shifts. Well, that concludes this series. Let me tell you, the paradigm has really shifted. Now, what are you going to do about it? Think about all that's been said. Keep an open mind and be prayerful. Maybe God is speaking to you in this time to do something you've never done before, to come up with a witty invention, to come up with an idea, to come up with a better way that society can benefit. I believe that the gifts that God has given his people are not just for his people only. I believe that God has given gifts to his people that are to be shared with society. And sometimes in times like these, when a paradigm shift occurs, then we have an army of his own people rising to the occasion to offer options, to offer comfort, to offer direction. Here is a high time that the church can play its part during a paradigm shift. The paradigm has really shifted. Now, what are you going to do about it? God bless you. We see you the next time here on Talking Points as we share something new and something fresh. See you then.